Thank you so much for joining me on another episode of Why I Love Flagler County, your local podcast spotlighting local businesses and local residents on why they love being in Flagler County. So today I'm super excited to have my guest and my good friend here, Rachel, with us today. Thank you so much, Rachel, for putting some time on the calendar and coming out today.
Absolutely. I'm so excited that I get to do this and kind of come alongside and support you and see what the process looks like too. It's kind of neat.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm super excited. Rachel and I have known each other almost about like a year and a half at this point, because you're one of the first people that I met when I came here to Flagler about 2 years ago, which is great. So we know each other pretty well. So I'd love for you to share, because it's a really cool story, kind of how what brought you down here to Flagler. So why don't you share just a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I'll try to keep it fairly brief because I think the story can get. But originally I was living in Florida or I was living in Virginia, I apologize. And at the time I was working for a company and was doing a kind of a salary position, doing some in-home counseling. Absolutely love my clients, love the families I'm working with, actually love the place that I was working. But kind of came to this place in life where I knew that I didn't necessarily want to do that long term. And a friend of mine actually lost her father to
Mm,
cancer. So when I had come down to Florida to visit her and then went back home, something about that kind of stuck in the back of my mind, and then was taking some time to just kind of take some personal time to pray and meditate on it, and didn't actually say anything specific, but the Lord was just very clear with me about go to Florida. Like this is something you should do. So I took some extra time to pray and make sure that that wasn't coming out of just any stresses in life, out of my own emotions, and was very specific about that. And a couple of days later, my roommate said, "You know what? I think we actually want to sell our house." And I was like, "Well, I think that's as specific as an answer as I need to. I need to move. Like I got to go somewhere." So through a long series of steps that just seemed very well kind of orchestrated, and through prayer
mhm.
and some wise counsel in my life, I realized this is where I was supposed to be. So ended up moving down to Palm Coast about 5 years ago now.
Wow, that's so cool and it's awesome. I think I really love how you reflected upon that. Like, you were praying, but then you prayed about the prayer to like double check. You're like, all right, let me just like come back and make sure that's like real and not just something I'm kind of making up in your head, which I think I'm not saying it like happens to people, but especially when you're emotional, it can get kind of hard to distinguish. So definitely. Yeah. Well, so you mentioned a little bit about some counseling that you did back in Virginia. So what inspired you to go into counseling, at all? What path kind of opened up for that way?
Open the door. So I give a whole lot of credit to one of my good aunts. I was walking on the beach with her one day and kind of talking about what I wanted to go into school for. And I knew I love kids, but didn't necessarily want to go into teaching, or at least didn't feel that was my skill. And she was like, "Have you taken any psychology classes? I just have a feeling that you would really like to work with people. And that might be an area to kind of look into." So when I was looking into degree programs, psychology opened up, and we didn't have any classes in high school with it. So I didn't know what the field was really like until I got to school and just signed up for a bachelor's degree in psychology. And then through that process, realized there's a lot of other doors. And through that, I came to understand that counseling was an avenue that you can do with kids and with people. And then through that process of starting out my work with kids and with in-home behavioral work, I realized very much do love people, and very much did love my degree program once I started learning much more specifically about psychology and development and um, human emotions, and not just the
Hmm.
how we use those well, and how we have agency in the change that we make in our life. So
Yeah. When it comes to, I mean, I think psychology is like one of those really fascinating and almost, I think, in a great way, tedious to learn because I think there are just so many different things you can learn. And there's always that like little asterisk when you learn something. It's like, yeah, but you could think of like there's like this that could happen and that could happen. And I mean that in like the most fascinating way possible. Like it's just so cool for me to learn. Is there anything that you learned through your psychology courses or classes that you're like, I had no idea this was anything. Like I had no idea this was even like whether it's like a concept or an emotion or how people process or anything like that.
um, gosh, I learned it from the ground up. Everything that I know about psychology was used
Right.
to, and it's a field where very much learned that you keep learning.
Mm,
Don't stop learning when you go into psychology. Um, Goodness, one thing that kind of opened a door. This is going to sound maybe relatively elementary, but it's something that I talk about with my clients, almost every single one of them, because of the difference that it made for me in understanding it. Was
mm-hmm,
that to show emotion is not a weakness.
mm-hmm,
That's not an incapacity in somebody to not hold themselves together or to not hold myself together, or that I didn't have to be um, unfazed, was kind of how, at least in a personal way, of what I took in learning. And a lot of learning psychology is learning yourself too, and confronting yourself. And very much learn through that process that the expression of emotion is a strength in and of itself. And a lot of people will describe themselves as emotional, but then when they do that, they give me kind of a negative face about it, or a negative like description when they kind of go into it a little bit more. And I loved learning the fact that every emotion has a function and a purpose.
mm-hmm.
Everything is designed. And I at least come from, I'm a Christian as well. And so I believe too, to be made in the image of God is also to recognize that God is an emotional being and he created us with those innate emotions. And so, of course, a lot of psychology has to do not just with the emotions, it's the brain, it's the heart, it's the mind, it's the body, it's all of the above. But that's, I could nerd out all day long on different things.
No, exactly. Me too. And
In my brain right now.
yeah, no, me too, completely. That's really why I asked that question. It's just so fascinating for me to hear, especially because you've done a lot more than obviously I have. Like YouTube videos is like my degree, right? But I really loved that part of you mentioning like psychology is every part of your body and your brain and your heart. And sometimes it's easy for us to forget that they're all connected for a reason. You know, you have these feelings, and if you're not handling in them in a certain way, in maybe the proper way or processing them in the right way, it affects other parts of your body. I don't think a lot of people kind of realize this sometimes. Like, I didn't really realize until pretty recently either. And it's really interesting to learn, and it's great for us to know that, hey, this bottling it up is not helping us. We think it is, but it's not, and it's gonna have long-term effects on our body, and we don't realize it until kind of it's too late.
Absolutely. And that there's, as you're talking about it, all the asterisks go off. One of the things, kind of going back to that other question that you were saying too, that I learning was called the biopsychosocial spiritual, and I say other, or a lot, and a lot of other practitioners will say other model. And that is
Mhm.
represent the fact that like our body, our mind and emotions, our social health, our spiritual health, as far as like our own belief system, whether we have one or don't, and other like our aspirations, our financial health, all of the above have an impact, and that we're all part of a whole person. You can't
Yeah,
truly is one thing and it not affect other things, whether that's in a unhealthy direction or a healthy direction. So
yeah. I love that. I mean, I think that's a really great place to come and understand. I think sometimes we can realize, like, oh, especially when you have strong emotions and you're not handling them in the right way, it can lead into other things. But I think it's one until it comes to like one of those like drastic things that you don't fully realize that the like causation doesn't really kick in until you're like, I don't know, just it's gone off the rails essentially. But again, we could probably nerd out for a good 30, 40, 50 hours about this. Um, well, before we wrap it up, I think this is a perfect question for you because you're always out there in the community. You're always meeting people. You're always having fun. What would you recommend for either like new people in the Flagler area on maybe where they can go, what they can do, or just, wherever people may be listening, they can find their own equivalent wherever they live.
one, I have like a couple of things that pop to mind because it's things that I love to do. So out, I love being outside. Flagler County, and because we gratefully live in Florida, we get to be in the sun a lot. So the trail system in Florida, or at least in Flagler, is really great, and they almost all interconnect. A lot of people, when they move down or when people talk about stuff, they'll talk about Lehigh Trail, and that connects up to other trails, Graham Swamp, a linear trail right in the middle of Palm Coast, right by the town center, not town center, but the community center. All of those are great. I apologize, dogs in the background. They love being outside too. But this place is another really kind of like hidden gem that some people don't always recognize or when they first move down. And then businesses wise, there are tons. And I don't mean to exclude anybody, but would also highly recommend going to Becca's Sweet Tooth, I think is what's called.
Oh,
That's in Benell, so like towards Flagler, Target side of town. If you go towards Target, she's out that way. And she's got a lot of great stuff. And I think she's got some other things in the works that she's trying to do out of the bakery there too.
mm-hmm.
So
Oh,
I think
that's so
she's got good. She's got bakery items, soup, sandwiches, all that kind of stuff.
I'll have to check it out because like I live like right in that area. So that's perfect. I think I've heard of it before, but it maybe just briefly in passing. But I'll definitely have to make the trip up now. It sounds like so much fun. Um, awesome. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for coming on here and sharing a few minutes. I really appreciate it. Is there any last thing you kind of want to throw out there before I wrap it up?
Um, Take care of yourselves.
Mm,
Whether it's not through the counseling realm specifically, and I'm biased towards the practice, so I feel like everybody can benefit. It
right.
doesn't necessarily just have to be through a counseling avenue. Um, Challenge what you believe, like look into your own beliefs and know the great impact that that can have. But at the same time, for the most part, like take care of yourselves all the
Yeah.
way to your psychosocial
I
sphere.
think that's a great place to end it. I think that makes so much sense. It's such a, I think we live right now. I think our society is slowing down just a little bit, but we are very go, 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 keep going, keep going, keep going. Instead of like, okay, you can go. Just make sure you're taking care of those parts of yourself so you can keep going. You don't have to stop, but you don't have to push yourself to keep going in those places where it's not feasible. Um, yeah, so that's a perfect place to end it. So thank you again, Rachel, for coming on and sharing a few minutes. And thank you to everyone listening. And I will see you all next time.